Hungry Trilobyte podcast would like to start by acknowledging these fine conventions. SoonerCon is Central Oklahoma's longest-running pop culture convention. The next event is scheduled for June 24th through 26, 2002 in Norman, Oklahoma. However, they need your help to put on the next event. Please visit SoonerCon.com to find out how you can help make SoonerCon 30 a reality. The Hellmouth Convention. The Hellmouth Convention is a celebration of all pop culture, but specifically things like Buffy, Angel, Firefly, and Dr. Horrible. It is held in Los Angeles, California, and the next event is scheduled for June 3rd through 5th, 2022. Proceeds benefit the Los Angeles LGBT Center as well as the Ron Glass Memorial Scholarship Fund. For more information, go to thehellmouth.org.
On tap today, we have Meg Lloyd. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm doing just so great. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. You are, I could say, the hero of the hour.
What?
Because
No.
we're still reeling from the season finale of Lower Decks. And I would say that of the things that we're going to remember from this season, the second is going to be going through all the backgrounds and looking at each individual little in-joke and reference and wink and nod. And the first thing we'll remember is a certain scene with Boimler, but let's put that aside for the moment.
With a holographic Boimler, I'd like to remind everyone that was not the actual Boimler. That was a situation, it was a situation designed to make Mariner uncomfortable, and it turns out a great majority of the audience as well.
I didn't see discomfort. I saw roaring laughter. It was a new defining moment.
A nude defining moment.
Yes. It's right up there with, I have been and always shall be your friend. And, the line must be drawn here. It's
yes. What is it? The censor bar must be drawn here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in that strata.
Yeah. There's definitely, they're very close to each other on that line. But yeah, season 2, how great, right?
It was. And I mean, I loved your work. You're the background artist. Is that technically your title?
No, I am one of the storyboard artists.
Okay. The distinction being, help me out here.
Yeah, the distinction being, so the story team is who gets the episode directly after the scripts are done. Mm-hmm. There are multiple story teams on our show. I'm for season 2, I was on team 2 with Kim Arndt as my director. So we have a director, 4 board artists, and then some revisionists, and we draw a rough version of the entire episode. So our director divides the episode up in pages, hands them out to us, and then each board artist pretty much comes up with absolutely everything in translating the episode from script to screen. Then we go through a review with our director who, oh man, Kim saved my bacon on the first episode because I just transferred over from a show that's entirely CG, which was Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous. And so I didn't have to draw any backgrounds while I was on that show because we had basically rough CG models of all of our sets. So I could go in there with a digital camera, pretty much take a picture of the set and then draw the characters on top of it. And my first episode of season 2 was Kayshawn, his eyes open, inside the ship of the Collector. And I had one of my scenes in there was the first couple of sequences when our ensigns have first beamed over with Lieutenant Kayshawn. So I had to draw in by hand all these backgrounds in my storyboards. They had to be in perspective. They had to have correct layout and all this sort of stuff. And Kim, my director, was just so amazing because I sent my stuff into her. And then she took the time to redline over perspective grids on all of my scenes. It was kind of embarrassing how badly I'd done the perspective the first time around. But you mentioned background design, and that's probably because I've mentioned on Twitter some of the things that I put in there. Those were Easter eggs that this. So that episode in and of itself was such a huge team effort because pretty much everyone on the show is a Trekkie. So we started out with a packet of artifacts that could be used on the Collector ship. And then if we had any other ideas, we could say, hey, I want to put this in. So one of my favorite episodes is the game. And I think the game that, Wesley wears and plays from Next Generation, I'm pretty sure the game headset was from the packet, but I was like, what do I put it on? And I decided I wanted to stick in the little winning bust of Picard from Picard Day. So that was something that was in my storyboard. And then when the board artists have finished our rough version of it and it's gone through our director and our supervising director has looked at it, our design team and our background team, they also take the rough drawings we've done and they come up with a more finalized version. And some of the elements that I put in get designed really nicely and placed in. And then they also come up with a lot more of the extra stuff. So pretty much everything that surrounds the horse, that whole wall, that was stuff that was brought in by the design team, because animation is basically the biggest team project that you have. And it just moves from team to team to team to team down the line until the episode is finished. So it goes the writers and, in the writer's room, and then story and design, and then background, animation. And then animation is both characters and effects, color designers, compositors who take all the information from all of the different art departments and make it look shiny, make it look nice, and put on the lens flares. And then of course our sound teams as well, both with music and Foley and everything. And it takes a long time to do a single episode, which is why you have multiple teams in each department working on multiple episodes at once, so we can make sure everyone gets to see a lot of Lower Decks every year in a timely manner.
I appreciate that. And yeah, I think that your tweets about the background definitely skewed my perspective of what you were doing just a little bit. I do have to wonder what it's like to have that episode or pretty much the whole season, but that episode is specifically when they say this is not going to be some characters on a matte painting. We are going extra for this. We are going to pack in the details.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just imagining what it's like to have that assignment put in front of you.
It's daunting. So the episodes I worked on in season 2, I was on episode 2, episode 5, episode 8. And the way that I see it is episode 2 had difficult backgrounds. Episode 5 had 1 million characters because I did all the a lot of Doppler scenes. And then episode 8 was a bunch of action because I did a lot of Act 3 and all the stuff with the Cerritos and the tail end when they're trying to convince Shari and Yam to change their score. Oh yeah, I guess we should say spoilers for Lower Decks season 2. People probably know that already, right? Yeah. So it was a really daunting task. Especially because I was like, oh, what if I stick in something that's inaccurate, or what if I do something wrong? Will everyone catch it down the line? I made a big chart just for my, it's messy. It's never something I'm going to share online, but I made a big chart of that first room they were in. And I labeled all the walls and where everything was. And I planned out where all the characters would go before I even started. So I would make sure I knew, what would be in the case here and what would be on the shelf here and stuff like that.
Very cool. I mean, I'm fascinated by the process. I do want to know if your favorite episode or one of them is the game, and you were involved, you had that headset in mind when you had this packet. Do you know for a fact if the headset itself actually had the Nintendo logo on it? That's supposed to have been what happened.
I do not know. The packet was just screen grabs from the show that our coordinator team, our production team, has put together. So I didn't draw a Nintendo logo on it. And I don't know if the original has one either, but
I was told it did, but it was supposed to be an in-joke because you could never see it on TV. It was too small. And I've wanted to confirm this for so long.
Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to confirm or deny. I mean, it could. I watched that episode a lot when I was little because it was one of the handful that we had recorded on VHS. So that was just one of the episodes that I knew the best. And so I was like, I get to put Easter eggs. We put that in there. I actually, in episode 2, I got a little bit of stage fright because besides doing a lot of initial work on the ship. I had the final scene in Riker's ready room when he's talking to the Mr. Boimler. And I actually got stage fright. It took me like 2 days to finally draw through that scene, even though it's really short, because I'm like, this is really going to be Jonathan's voice, and he's going to see it, and people are going to watch it. That's actually Riker, but I got over it. I think the scene turned out pretty fun. I got to do a Riker lean. I asked my director if I could get him to swing his leg over a chair, and she's like, well, there's not reasonably a chair over by the window. And I'm like, oh, I guess you're right. Someone else gets to do his leg swinging over a chair, I'm sure.
I'm almost not sure how Riker wouldn't have a chair there. I mean, he just deliberately puts chairs in places, I think.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. In order to perform the Riker maneuver.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I'm interested that you can actually get stage fright from somebody who's not physically there, and you're not even on a stage.
And it's somebody who I would never even show it to, because I'm sure by the time that the voice talent sees it, it's much further down the line.
Mm-hmm.
So the storyboard team, we work on our assignment for about 6 weeks. So a half, about half to do a rough version. Then we get notes from our director and supervising director, and then we clean it up and we send it on to edit for Mike and the other teams to review it as well. So not only that, we made a majority of season 2 from home, like during pandemic. So I never physically met anyone. I'm very good Zoom friends with them, of course. And our story coordinator, Jeffrey New, made sure that our storyboard teams got to meet each other. Like we've had a couple team lunches, team dinners, but I'm actually really sad I didn't get the chance to work in studio and meet all of the other artists and creatives on the team.
There's season 3.
What?
There's season 3. There's time in the future.
There's time.
Mm-hmm. And that's the great thing about the Trek universe, is that once you're kind of in there, you will bounce around for the rest of your life. You never know what's going to come down the pike.
Yeah. I hope Lower Decks gets 10 seasons and 10 movies.
You got to have at least a few more seasons, because the concept is so great. It's extremely popular.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And
it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
I really like it.
And I love Discovery and I love Picard, but I think people are eager for a show that is just fun. Mm-hmm. And it fills that gap nicely.
Yeah. I'm also really excited to see Prodigy. Like the previews that have come out and the clips and everything, it just looks beautiful. Oh, their opening titles. I'm very excited to see Prodigy.
Yeah, it again, I want something that we can show as a family show, and that's something we haven't quite gotten yet.
Yeah.
Again, liking the other shows for what they are, there is a need for this too.
Mm-hmm.
Grab that younger generation.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that they're bringing in Janeway and Chakotay and other characters, instead of just going with the new cast, which is important too.
Mm-hmm. And in such a creative way as well. Like I love the idea that it's a Janeway hologram program that's specifically for people stranded in the Delta Quadrant. I'm like, yeah, there's Starfleet saw a need and they've filled it.
And that is kind of what I come back to when a lot of these things, when in training, and then people talk about Starfleet training, is that somebody has to sit down and say, this could happen more than once, and we need to tell people what to do in this scenario. Do you happen to have the Starfleet Survival Guide?
I do not.
Okay, it actually does have in excruciating detail what you should do if you have to survive planetary reentry, or you think you may have found yourself in the past.
Amazing. I'll have to give that one a read.
It's a book by David Mack. It's a pretty dense read, just because it literally is what it is. It's like a military survival guide.
Man, I'll have to. It's on hiatus right now, but I was DMing a Star Trek Adventures RPG, and I feel like that would be an important book for a GM of such a game to have.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite bits in there was that they talked about reflashing the firmware in your tricorder in order to get additional functions. And it's like they actually thought about using a real tactic that you would use on a device today was something invented in the future. I like that.
Not exactly on those same lines, but one of my favorite Twitter accounts is Riker Googles things or Riker Googling things. And it's stuff like erase holodeck search history or what moon was Sailor Moon from? And it's just someone tweets ridiculous things that are from Riker's future Google history. And it always gives me a laugh when it comes up on my Twitter feed.
On the topic of Riker, just since you said you had stage fright, I feel like I should maybe try to make you feel a little bit better. If I could, that might be nice. I've met quite a few of the various cast members at cons, and I always try to, strike up a conversation about something like actually fun and just, pass the time a little bit while I'm there getting my autograph instead of. I was really interested in talking to William Frakes, or Jonathan Frakes, sorry.
His transporter clone is William Frakes.
Right. And I get up there and I just talked to Brent Spiner. I had a great chat about another project he'd done. And I, talked to Michael Dorn and had a great chat about something he'd done. And I get up to Jonathan Frakes and suddenly my mind completely turns to mush. And I don't know why. But the only thing I can make my mouth say is, I'm really glad to meet you because I'm from Pennsylvania too.
Like, Jonathan Frakes just has this effect on people.
Yeah, I guess. But I mean, you do cons too, I'm sure.
You
know what it's like.
I've done a few. There's a writers conference I go to every year in Utah, which is where I grew up. I haven't been to Comic-Con yet. I have the secret wish that I'm going to hold out until I'm personally invited, to be on a panel for a show or something that I've done. Actually, though, that's just an excuse. Like, I could go. I just never seem to register for a badge in time.
I've not done San Diego Comic-Con. I have a really good time with more, smaller regional Comic-Cons. The Dallas Comic-Con when they still had that, and some of the others like El Paso. I find a smaller show, you get a lot more bang for your buck.
One I really love and miss is PodCon up in Seattle. That only ran 2 years, but that was definitely the best con adventure I've ever been on. It was just a podcast convention run by Hank and John Crane and the McElroy family, and it was a nice little con.
I heard good things about it. I like that you called it an adventure, because that's what it really should be. A little bit of a treasure hunt, a little bit of a journey. You find some companions you weren't planning on.
Maybe I brought my sister to one of them, and then the other I'd met up with some web friends, which was great to meet them. And my poor sister, Emily, don't listen to this. I'm going to tell them the driving story. She was really worried about driving in Tacoma and Seattle because she'd never been there before. And I remember when she was coming to pick us up from the con to take us to the hotel afterwards, she got so panicked by the traffic and being in an unfamiliar area that as me and my friend were about to reach the car, she's like, I've waited too long. And she takes off without us. And we're like, and she calls me on the phone. She's like, I'm sorry. I don't know how to get back to find you guys. And I'm like, it's okay. We'll just turn the corner. And she's like, there's no corner. It's a circle. And I'm like, well, then just drive the whole circle till you see us again. Sorry, Emily. It's a good story. But that's one of my treasured memories from PodCon.
So, podcaster to podcaster, is there another podcaster con out there that would be worth going to?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
None that I have found. Most because the final PodCon was in 2019, and then I don't know if you noticed, but 2020 happened right after that. So yeah, I haven't been on the hunt for new conventions since then. But if I hear any, I'll let you know. If you hear of
Please
any,
do.
send them my way.
So getting into Lower Decks, being a Trek fan, you said you watched a lot of Next Gen.
Hmm.
Is Next Gen your favorite or
Voyager is actually my favorite because I
okay?
watched a lot of Next Gen when I was really, really young. And then Voyager started coming out around the time I think I was 7, 8, 9, like around that age. And I just remember being so excited to be like, it's a brand new, because I'd also seen, the original series and some of the movies at that point. And it was just exciting to have a brand new series that we were getting more story of, week to week to week. I really love Janeway. She's my favorite captain. Another reason why I'm so excited for Prodigy. And then the only series I haven't seen all of yet is Deep Space Nine. Um, just because I wasn't really into it when it was airing. And I'd watched 2 or 3 seasons of it back when I was in college. But then once I got my first jobs and I've been like working, 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 I don't like to listen to shows that I've
Mm-hmm.
never seen before while I'm working, which leads to me just re-listening to a lot of my old favorites again and again. But someday soon, maybe this Christmas break, I am going to sit down and I am going to finish Deep Space Nine because I know it's good. I just have to finish it.
I find sitcoms are very good for working too because I don't mind if I miss a scene here or there when I have to focus.
Yep.
But yeah,
Um,
Deep Space Nine, you're definitely on the right track. You want to pay
I want to
attention.
watch it. I want to
Hmm.
see the costumes and the actors and the camera setups and things. That's one of the things that's been really fun about working on Lower Decks is even though it's an animated series, there's a real focus on emulating the same sort of where the characters are set up and where the cameras are set up that you find in the live action series. So it's not a bunch of, you know, just standing and talking, in front of a flat background, that whenever possible, you have someone seated at a con and someone standing over them, or where you set your camera on the bridge and how you like gather everyone around a console together. Um, that a lot of the artists we like heavily reference the live action shows when we're working on the animated series to make sure that we give it that authentic Trek feeling.
It shows. It really does show because you can tell the way everything's framed and the way the motion is set up that it does invoke a lot of the original look and feel of the earlier shows, especially not looking at Discovery and Picard like those 90s and 60s shows.
Mhm. Um, Especially because in those older series, being filmed on actual film meant every shot was much more expensive just in the raw materials required than it is today shooting on digital. um, which is why older blooper reels, you always hear the people behind the camera being much more grouchy than they are these days. Because you've got a limited amount of film and film's expensive and it's, hard to go through a bunch of things to edit, cut, all that sort of stuff. So they would really focus on having these robust setups, like these master shots where you could film the whole scene, or you come in close on the console and film again, your entire take with just these two people, to give you a much more simple time in the edit bay. So there's a particular feel you get to action movies these days that they really focus on very excessive and percussive cutting, because they can just cover the action from any angle they want and assemble it all later down in the edit bay. When a lot more older films, generally there's more planning put into those kind of projects because they were working with both time and money constraints that are different from what filmmakers have today.
Good point. I mean, I can think of several scenes from various Trek series where you would see a character and you would see 4 different cuts, one of them running down the hall, the next of them jumping, the next of them flying through the air, and the fourth of them landing. And you could definitely tell, if you were thinking about it, which one was actually them and which one was their stunt double.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. But it does create a very specific look, and that's kind of what you guys managed to capture in animated form.
Mm-hmm. It's such a fun show to be on. I mean, it is still like got its difficult moments. For example, season 2, episode 5, An Embarrassment of Duplers. There's a lot of duplers. I got to do the very first initial scene where they split in half, which was really fun. I love doing those sort of like crazy sci-fi transformations. And so I would have storyboarded out a very rough, kind of stilted in its motion, black and white version. And then seeing what the animation and design and effects teams did with it after that I think was the most fun episode for me to watch. But then, of course, the duplers duplicating exponentially. And so the more and more scenes you had, the more and more duplers you had to draw, because you can't just copy and paste the exact same dupler in the exact same pose, because then it would just look like we've got a million cardboard cutouts. So what I did is I drew about 10 different dupler poses. And this is for the scene on the bridge when basically everyone's getting smashed up against the doors and everything. So not when the captain's yelling at everyone to stop, but it's the moment when they're like, she's giving us the silent treatment. So I had drawn about 10 different duplers, and I would just copy and paste them in clusters, trying to make it look as organic as possible so I could fill up the entire bridge and make it feel more grounded in what was actually happening, and not like I just rubber stamped a dupler in there. I don't remember if I counted or not. I feel like I got 50 or 60 duplers in my biggest shot. It might be fewer than that though, but it felt like 200.
You realize now every time one of us has some sort of major anxiety day, we just picture a brain full of duplers up here.
And you've just got to yell at yourself and snap yourself back in one piece.
Yeah.
So you had actually asked me to jump on this podcast with you back when we were still working on season 2. And I had asked you if we could wait till after, because one of the things I take pretty seriously is my NDAs, and I don't, talk about stuff until it's out, until it's announced. Well, in that dupler episode, there's a scene with Rutherford and Tendi working on a model of the Cerritos. And it's like a working model of the ship. And I mentioned a couple minutes ago that I was on a Star Trek RPG at the time, and we were streaming on Twitch. And completely unprompted by me, one of my players was like, hey, I'm going to be working on a miniature working model of our ship. And I was like, you are? And he's like, yeah, I feel like it'd be a really cool idea. And I kept my game face on, but I remember thinking, oh my gosh, if someone from my team sees this, they're going to think I told my RPG game about this show, and I didn't. And I remember having to play it like extremely cool. And then when that episode came out, I sent my friend screen caps, and I was like, I don't know how you guessed this exact scene was happening, but you did. I think that speaks to how well Mike and the writers know what it's like to be a Star Trek fan and what you would want to have if you lived in the Star Trek universe. And it's a working model of the ship you're on.
Just again, couldn't possibly known, and I can't be the only person that thought of this, but before the episode, I happened to get a vinyl cutter a couple months ago. And the very first thing I wanted to make, just to prove that I could make it, was a cetacean op seal. Which was basically like taking the Voyager style Delta, but instead of the little rectangle, putting a whale silhouette behind it.
Oh, that's cute.
I thought, yeah. So, and then finally in the last episode of Lower Decks, we find out that the Cerritos has a station ops department.
Yes, with the whales that they just love being on the ship. They love all the crew members. Oh, I loved so I didn't work on the finale. But I think my favorite running bit through the finale is how excited Boimler is for Captain Freeman Day.
Mhm.
And how everyone he talks to is like, isn't that for kids? Ugh,
That's him though.
that is him. That's definitely him. Oh, poor Boimler. He not as much in season 2, but I feel like in season 1 he was really like the butt of the joke. But I think he's gained a bunch of confidence from being on the Titan in season 2, and he's learned to sort of roll with it. And I really like seeing his growth, like his character arc that we've watched over the first 2 seasons.
That's an interesting point about character arcs on Lower Decks, because for a lot of the older Treks, you didn't see a huge arc
Mm-mm.
in the characters. And
Yeah.
with animated shows, you tend to think of no character arc because everybody's supposed to be back the same they were at the beginning of the show. But Lower Decks, it throws both of those expectations to the wind. These characters are growing, and they're growing pretty rapidly.
It really does. Yeah. So like the Boimler we saw in the season 2 finale, he's not unrecognizable from where he started, but it slowly, steadily. I'd say Boimler and Mariner are the 2 characters that are really changing the most, because they started from, I don't want to say a negative place, but they've definitely matured into who they are right now. And that's been really fun to watch.
It is fun. It's rewarding to watch too, because you're wondering, are these people going to move up in the ranks, move up in their, or are they going to stay with Starfleet at all? You're not used to seeing
Right?
characters who don't necessarily have those grand ambitions.
Mm-hmm. Or even if they do, sometimes they are Ensign Harry Kim and they're stuck in the Delta Quadrant where they just can't get promoted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because somebody always has to be the ensign.
Yep. So
Which is the
sorry.
most TV logic statement I've ever heard.
Man, do you listen to the Delta Flyer?
I've heard a couple episodes.
It's pretty fun. My same sister I mentioned earlier, I gifted her a Delta Flyer Patreon subscription for Christmas last year. So
It's a good gift.
we're big Delta Flyer fans in our house.
I'm going to make sure the link to that in your podcast as well goes into my show notes at aaronbossick.com. So if somebody wants to check those things out, they'll have a quick link to it.
Oh, great. And yeah, more specifically, what my podcast is with my sister is it's a general media review podcast. We're calling it My Sister Made Me View It. And it's things that one of us have just loved forever. We've never been able to get the other one into. So for her first long form pick, I'm watching the 1999 Roswell, produced by Jonathan Frakes, who also cameos in it multiple times as himself, which is a lot of fun. And then for my big first choice, we're covering the Way of Kings books by Brandon Sanderson, which I lent her the first book to that series, and she left it in her car for 3 years and never cracked it open. So I'm glad we're finally podcasting so I can get her to read it.
Now, that is so much fun, because one of my worst personality traits, for some people who know me well, is I compelled to share stuff I really like.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not necessarily a great judge of if they like it too, or if they will. So have you come across something that's like, you think it's amazing and your sister is like, not so much?
Well, it's actually the opposite of that. I'm warming up to it, but I didn't really enjoy the first 8 or 9 episodes of Roswell. Had a little bit of a bad attitude going into that. And then we're covering little shorter things in between. She really loves Mike Flanagan's The Haunting of Hill House. And I really liked the front half of it, but really disliked the writing in the back half of that. And so we're going through that one right now too. We're almost done with it. We're on episode 7 out of 9, 10. But yeah, so she loves everything that I choose because I have impeccable taste. And then I've been a little Grinch-like about a couple of her choices because I am too picky.
Too picky can you like wrap your head around maybe why she'd like, even if it's not your cup of tea?
Oh yeah. Some things just aren't for me. No one has made the perfect piece of art. Art is subjective and it's not universal. So you'll have some people, and we'll see this with Star Trek, how we have some people absolutely love one captain and one crew above everything else. Or we'll have, people who really hate the newer series, but really love the older series. Or maybe people who couldn't get into the older episodes, but have found, that they really jive with the newer stuff that's coming out. And so not everything is for everyone.
And there's definitely something to be said for personal experience being woven into it. Like you watched Next Gen when you were little, so did I. That can't be separated from how we feel about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And even somebody finding it now, they're going to probably have a good experience with it, but they won't have the experience of just seeing a few episodes and wondering what else is out there. They've already got 7 seasons waiting for them.
Right. Yep. One of my friends, she watched Lower Decks because I was on it and she loved it. And she's like, is there more Star Trek? And I'm like, is there more Star Trek? And I tried to show her Voyager and she's like, this is kind of boring. And I was like, oh, okay. So she really likes Lower Decks. She likes the quicker pace. She doesn't quite jive with the slower space drama. And I was like, but Voyager, Next Generation, come on.
Have you given her a shot at the animated series?
Not the original one, no.
It's just because number one, it's probably in terms of format the closest to Lower Decks.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my introduction to Trek.
Oh, awesome.
The very first memory I have of ever watching Trek was the counterclock incident.
Okay.
And I was like 5.5, and it was on Nickelodeon. So that's why I want Prodigy. Because seeing Star Trek go to Nickelodeon for me is going back to the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, your own experience gets wrapped up in it too.
Yeah, of course. And like when you saw something is almost just as impactful as the thing that you were seeing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we tend to grab onto things that we watched when we were young, and especially in our mid-teen years when everything is so intense.
Yeah.
Fiction becomes intense along with it too. I mean, how many people keep listening to the same songs they did in high school? I mean, exactly. Yeah.
I even have some of the YouTube playlists I made in high school. They're all Bleach AMVs of Ichigo and Rukia, because that was like 80% of my high school personality was how much I loved Bleach and manga and anime in general. I was one of those kids in high school and still am. That's why I'm in animation to this day.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And I mean, to have it grab you and follow you, I know animation is a tough gig.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you managed to crack your way into it.
Yeah, it was rough going, but I did it, and now I get to just work on fun stuff all the time. So that's hard, as I'll get on these really cool shows and then they don't get announced for a year or more after I've been working on them. Like an example is this Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous. I was on it for, I don't even know how long, probably 6 or 7 months before it was even announced. And then it was about another, not a full year, but it was announced, and then there was just ages until the first episode aired. But by the time the first episode aired, all my work on the show had been finished and I'd moved on to Lower Decks. So Lower Decks was actually the first time I've been on a show while it's airing, because I came on board for season 2. And like Mike McMahon has said in some of his interviews this week, we were working on season 2 while season 1 was coming out. And so it was really fun to be on the show while the episodes were airing. And to see, fan reactions and what people are saying on Twitter, what people are saying on YouTube. And it was very gratifying to see, while there was kind of a negative, I'm going to say a negative knee-jerk reaction at first. And this happens all the time. We actually just saw it happen with the Netflix live action Cowboy Bebop series, where they released their live action version of the opener, and everyone was like, "Ugh, I don't think I like this." And then they released an original scene just this week, and everyone's like, "Oh, maybe this is to my taste." So it's interesting to see some of the initial knee jerk, "Oh, I don't like this show style," or "I don't like these show characters." And then as the season rolled on, to see more and more people fall in love with the series, with Lower Decks.
I've learned not to judge anything by the first few episodes, and I won't really, for Trek especially, I won't judge anything until season 3 is done.
Yeah. I have a first season rule myself. So like my aforementioned, I really didn't like The Haunting of Hill House. I'm still really looking forward to the second series in the anthology, The Haunting of Bly Manor, because the first season is where you figure out what you're doing. And the second season is like, all right, we know how this rolls. Now let's do the parts of it we really liked. So yeah, I always try and give shows I watch like one season's worth of leeway.
Especially when you know that it's made 5 or 6, 7 seasons, because if it got to that point, it's got to be going somewhere.
Yeah,
even if the first season has some clunkers. Just to throw out an example, I'm actually a huge fan of season 1 of Buffy.
Okay, yeah.
Which totally gets crapped on by all sorts of fans and non-fans, but I think it's solid.
I really like season 1. I love the season 1 finale with Prophecy Girl and the stuff with the Master. I really like season 1 of Buffy.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. I don't care for season 4 or 7, but I really like, let's see, in order of favorite seasons, probably 6, 5, 1, 3, 2. No, because I like season 2. I don't know. It's very hard to rank them, but I do really like Buffy, and I like the first season, but I know it can be a hard watch for some people to get to.
Yeah, and I think it kind of boils down to, are you somebody who's like you and I, where they're willing to let it build for quite a while before they really throw in their 2 cents, or do they need to know 2 episodes in if it's for them? And I understand that perspective.
Yeah, you don't want to spend 20 hours on something that you don't enjoy.
Do you think working in the industry has given you a little more leaning in that direction, or is that just the way you've always been wired?
That's kind of the way that I've always been. Once I decide that something's not for me, I try not to super complain about it, especially online. I mean, the fact that my sister's making me do a podcast about shows I don't like is different because it's about the discussion. But like, I try not to slam things I don't like on the internet. Yeah, I just try to find the things I really do like and then make fan art for those things.
Especially if you know that something that isn't really your cup of tea is beloved by many people of the internet. You don't want to say that you don't really care for their favorite thing.
Yeah.
And
listen, if
you say you don't like it and they say it's inconceivable.
Yeah. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Yeah. It's really that easy.
Don't be a jerk.
Yeah. It's hard though when if you say something mean but also really funny, you get super rewarded on the internet for it with like, attention and it's nice to get a lot of Twitter notifications on things. Heaven knows I enjoy that.
Yeah. I had a tweet go mega viral last June. I told a joke about Star Wars, and I want to stress it was just a joke. Yeah. It wasn't even a mean-spirited joke. But yeah, it ended up with like 6.5 million instructions.
Wow. Oh.
And got retweeted by Mark Hamill.
Oh, well, that's where at least 4 million of the things came from. Wow.
And I didn't care. All it was is I just hope everybody knew it was a joke. And there's just a little part of me like, just no one's just trying to be funny.
Yeah, it's like I'm just being court jester to my little corner of the internet. Like,
exactly.
and
I like my people.
Yeah, it's like this was my hole. It was made for me. It's you want to say things that your online friends like, and sometimes, the internet's a public place, and someone overhears you in the town square, and they're like, "Hey, get a load of what this guy said about Star Wars," and then it's all over.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Megan, I don't want to take too much of your time. I'm really having a good time talking to you. I'd love to have you back on any time. But I want to make sure people can locate your podcast, your Twitter presence, and all the other places that you like to send people. So what should I put into the show notes?
All right. Well, if you want to find just me, myself, and I, you will search at Third Child Art. That's all spelled out one word, at Third Child Art, on both Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. And then the podcast that I run with my sister is called My Sister Made Me View It. You can find us at Sis Made Me View It on those same social media sites. And we try and do a unique feed for what each of us have picked. So like we have Megan's feed, which is The Way of Kings, Emily's feed, which is Roswell, and then we'll have a shorter miscellaneous feed where we cover things like Haunting of Hill House and Mob Psycho 100 is what we're tackling next. Woo! Because season 3 just got announced and I'm excited. So that is where you can find me on the internet.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I hope to have you back on real soon.
Awesome. Well, I will catch up with you later then. Aaron, thank you so much for having me on.
Anytime.